Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel, and welcome to this 2012 Toyota Camry with transmission problems, with a very specific transmission problem that these cars were born with. If you own a 2012-2014 Toyota Camry 4-cylinder, you will have something that is called the infamous torque converter shudder. Right around 40 miles an hour, the torque converter will start shuddering. If you accelerate harder or hit the brakes, it goes away. In this video, we're going to tear into this car, we're going to replace the torque converter, we're going to show you the entire repair process and a lot of information in between, so you'd know if you have your car do this, you know exactly what's going on and what it takes to fix this. Let's get started. So let's talk about the torque converter problem. And before we do that, just as a side note, I'm actually removing the engine here, not the transmission. And we've discovered this through experience. If you actually remove the engine instead of the transmission, you actually can do this job a lot easier, more effectively. You don't disturb the subframe and the whole car, and the alignment goes out. It's a lot less invasive to actually pull the engine out. And we'll talk about this a little bit down the road, but that is the easier way to do this, especially in the RAV4. Now let's talk about the torque converter problem, and this is the interesting part about this. So Toyota is very secretive about why things are done, why they happen. They just issue a fix and that's it. They don't really share what exactly happened and what caused it. But yours truly loves to investigate the why. So this came from my personal car. I used to own a 2012 Camry with a U760 transmission, which, by the way, that's the affected transmission. And I observed what happened before and after, and I actually looked into the data of it. So here's what happens. When the torque converter engages, the clutch engages, you actually have less mechanical loss, less kind of torque loss between the engine and transmission, so you get better gas mileage and more power. So they decided in 2012, and this only affects 2012 to 14, they decided to make the torque converter engage very early, like as low as 20 miles an hour. So what this does is it lugs the clutch. That clutch is not a heavy-duty clutch. It's usually engaged at higher speeds, but when it engages as low as 20 miles an hour, it actually lugs it, and now you burn up that clutch very quickly. So after the software update, all of a sudden, that torque converter doesn't engage up to 30, 35 miles an hour. So that's really how they fixed this. But it's very important that you understand the following. We're replacing the torque converter with an exact same torque converter. There's nothing special about the new one in the kit. But what caused the failure here is the software and the way it's programmed. So basically, if your torque converter is not shuddering, you just need to update the software and you're good. You're never going to have this issue. But if your torque converter is already shuddering because you already had the mechanical issue, you need to do both. This is very important that you understand the difference. Now, Toyota did do a voluntary update where they updated all the cars, and the ones that did have a mechanical issue, they extended a warranty for 8 years, 150,000 miles. Most of them actually are out of that by now, but this is important that you understand that if you're doing this outside of the warranty, you're going to need to not only replace the torque converter, you need to update the software. Folks, this is super important because otherwise you're going to have this problem again in no time. So if you're doing this at an independent shop that doesn't have update capability, or they're not familiar with this issue, or a transmission shop, worse, most transmission shops have no idea. They just think, oh, it's just a torque converter failure. It's not, because it's going to come back if you don't update the software. So if you do this, and this is, by the way, somewhat of a DIY job. I mean, if you're very capable, of course, if you've pulled an engine before in your driveway, you can probably do this. That's why I tell you, pull the engine, not the transmission. To pull the transmission, you need to drop the subframe, and you're hanging underneath it, and it's just not ideal. Pulling the engine on this is actually super simple. And if you think about it, you are removing almost the same things. The only thing you gotta do is drain the coolant, disconnect the coolant hoses, and then pull the exhaust manifold and the alternator instead of pulling the whole subframe down. So at this point in the video, we're about to pull the engine out. You see it, super simple. We did have some stuff go on while we're removing it. We'll talk about it in a little bit. You don't even have to drain the AC. So with the engine coming out right now, let me go back to the live video and we'll talk about it some more afterwards. So we got the engine out, and in case you haven't seen it, we have a full rebuild video. This is the 2AR FE. As we talked about, this is a lot easier than pulling the subframe and pulling everything else and hanging things up. I rarely did it that way. I've done it the other way, but this is a lot easier, a lot safer, and you're basically removing almost the same stuff. Still got to remove the bell housing bolts, which 2 of them actually broke. We'll talk about that in a second. But the only real casualty, other than those 2, is this little compressor bolt right here. I don't know, we did the Tacoma, and this bolt also broke, so we're gonna have to drill this out and probably remove this bracket, drill this out, or heat it up, do something. This is steel on steel, so I don't know why it broke. There's no like chemical reaction or whatever, or dissimilar metals, but that's what we got. But something else I noticed as we took this engine apart, and this was pretty quiet, but if you hear it, that doesn't sound very happy. This is a tensioner, and this is something, by the way, if you own a 2AR FE or even 1AR, this tensioner got updated. So you see this one is plastic. The housing is plastic. The new one, this is metal. So if you go buying one, make sure you buy the metal one. That's the updated one. But this one is going to need replacement. While we're here, we're just going to order one and get it replaced. Very simple. Water pump is good. It does have a tiny little leak. If you see it right here, we have a tiny little leak from the water pump right here. Not going to do too much about it. We'll talk to the customer. If he wants to get it taken care of, we will. Otherwise, we'll leave it alone. But let's go look at our torque converter. And this is where things are at. If you look right here, here's our torque converter, very easily accessible, stationary in the car. It's not going anywhere. We're going to pull it in a bit. You'll see that on camera. We do have 2 bolts that broke, one of them here, the other one here. Kind of hard to show you. There's the other one that broke. I'm going to try to drill them out. I'm surprised this one didn't break, the one that goes in the engine here. This is the one that always breaks. This one came right out, but these 2 broke. This is a first for me. But now let me show you the kit. This is where, I've talked about this in another video, but this is the kit that comes from Toyota. And the best part is, this kit not only has a torque converter, let's open it up. This kit has the torque converter, but it also has the gasket for the oil pan and new magnets and all the drain plugs you need and the fill plug. Has everything in it, and it also has the new torque converter. You can see it right here with some looks to be diapers, Japanese diapers. But here's the best part. If you go to this car and only buy the torque converter alone, it will cost you more than this kit that comes with everything you need short of the fluid. Don't understand what's the deal? I'll put some of these part numbers. Basically, the cars that are affected by this are 2012, 2014, Toyota Camry, 4-cylinder only, and then RAV4s from 13 and 15. These are the cars that are affected. Put the part numbers so you know in case. This is somewhat of a DIY job, actually. If you've pulled an engine in your driveway, you could probably do this. Pull the engine out, short of the software update. Let's go ahead and pull that torque converter and we'll install the new one, because there are a few things that you need to know about. This will always make a giant mess. When you pull the torque converter, you can't drain them on Toyotas. So what I'm gonna do is gonna grab the torque converter and pull it straight. There goes the fluid. But if you turn it up, you won't get as much fluid. Don't worry about this leakage a little bit. This is normal. This little fluid will clean it. But I'm gonna go grab the new one and we're gonna install it. There's something very, very important about the installation here. We're gonna put the torque converter in. And here's what you do to install torque converters. Right now, this is not seated all the way. You're gonna hold it from the nose, and kind of turn it and push it. See how it's engaging? There it goes. It is vital that this is engaged all the way. If it is not engaged all the way, you could damage the pump and we have major problems, or you can't even put the engine on. So what you do is you put your hand behind it. You can't even fit anything. It's like this close to hitting the bell housing in the back, and that's how you know this is fully engaged. Now there is in the book, put a ruler and measure the measurement, but common sense plays a small part here. Put your hand behind it, there's no way there's anything else. It's about to hit the bell housing. It's in all the way. And something equally vital, when you go install your engine, as soon as you put the engine on, you put your hand through the opening of the starter, which you can see the opening of the starter right here. If you look up, got a hose jammed into it, but the opening of the starter right here, you're gonna put your finger through and try to spin this torque converter when your engine first goes on. If this spins freely, it's not jammed against the flex plate, or the flywheel flex plate actually is the correct term here. If it doesn't turn, we have a problem. Sometimes it'll turn a little tight. That's fine, it's just dragging. But if it's locked up, we have a problem. That means your torque converter is not all the way in. Folks, this is vital that you do this whenever you're doing a job like this, because this could not only damage your torque converter, it could damage your crank, it could damage your transmission. It is not good business. Of course, any mechanic that have done this knows about this, and when you go put an engine back together and this doesn't spin, you stop, take it back out. Do not start this car like that, because you'll have major problems. Having said that, we're gonna continue on. I'm gonna put the engine back in the car. We're gonna assemble everything. First, we gotta drill these bolts and drill that one. We'll get all that taken care of. But once we get the engine back in the car, we're gonna continue the live video. When we take the pan, and we're also putting a transmission filter or strainer, you'll see that process in case you're doing it yourself. So welcome to day 2. When I was recording this originally, I did not kind of tell you the timeline. We started halfway through the day on the first day, and then this is day 2 where we install the engine. So let's talk about some costs for this job, and this is the interesting part, I suppose. So the torque converter's kit, which I put the part number on when we were talking about it, that kit is actually $577, somewhere there around, and some change. Then we needed coolant, 2 gallons of coolant, $54. Then when we put spark plugs, customer wanted to install the spark plugs. They were a little early, but by the time he wanted them done, they were right around $45. We put a new drive belt, that was $35. Then there's a transmission filter and the O-ring, they're right around $70. And then the one bolt that broke for the compressor, that was $2. Drive belt tensioner was right around $225. So labor for this job is nine and a half hours. Shops will charge all kinds of stuff. Some shops will charge less, some shops will charge more, dealerships will charge all over the place. I felt like this was a fair time for the customer, fair time for us, and the grand total for this job, including the additional incidentals, if you would, like the bolt and spark plugs and the other stuff, it was $2,330. Some people will say this is not worth it, but unfortunately, this is not the kind of repair you want to neglect, because this thing shudders so bad. And speaking of the shudder, I did not mention this at the beginning of the video. Let's describe exactly how you verify this concern. So the car needs to be fully warmed up. You need to be driving right around 35 to 50 miles an hour, in that range. You cannot be accelerating hard. You just need to kind of coast, not coast, but cruise at that speed. Like get to 40 miles an hour and just hold that speed. All of a sudden, the whole car will start shaking. I mean, shaking violently. The minute you let go of the gas, it goes away. The minute you accelerate a little harder, it goes away. You touch the brake, it goes away. That's a classic torque converter shudder, because that's when the clutch engages and there's enough load on it where it starts shaking. Now, for the ones that have not gotten the software update, which, by the way, there was actually 2 or 3 revisions to the software update, they will do that even at like 20 miles an hour, because remember, we talked about this. It will engage that soon. Now, the ones that at this day in 2023 that have not gotten an update, I can guarantee you have a torque converter shudder. They were that guaranteed almost. But if you've had one of or two of the revisions of the software, the first software update didn't really work very well, didn't really do much. And then the second one fixed majority of them, and the last one was actually when it was confirmed that the 2014 model or 2014 and a half failed, because from the factory, the 2014 and a half had the first software update that didn't work. It just prolonged it. They changed some parameters, but it didn't really work. So that's back in the day when it was just a TSB. Then it was a campaign, is when the second and third software update came out. So it is important that if you have one of these cars, and you don't have any shudder, get the software update done right away. You know, you can go to a dealership. Some dealerships will fight you over this because it was a campaign. Or you can go to a small shop that does this. I do this in my shop. You come to me. I will do the software update. However, this is a unique case. Not always you want to do software updates and get the latest. This is not an iPhone, folks. Some cars, when you do software updates, they require new hardware. You have to change something physically. But in this case, you actually do want the software update done as soon as possible, especially if you're not sure. Easily can be checked, and that's that. And if you do have your mechanic do this, it is vital that they drop the pan, install the new magnets. This cannot be skipped. We have actually seen transmission failures following a torque converter repair because the magnets were not replaced and placed properly, because you're going to have too much debris from that worn down clutch. Having said that, here's the pan coming down. Let's go talk about the filter and everything else, and we'll wrap up the video. All right, so we come to this point. We got the transmission pan, and you must remove the transmission pan because we have to replace the magnets and install actually additional magnets. That's the procedure from Toyota, and the idea here is we want to try to capture as much of the debris from the failed torque converter as possible. That is the idea. We're also going to replace the transmission filter. We already have the pan off. The customer just wanted to do this. And here are the magnets for this job. It just comes in the kit like we talked about earlier. 4 magnets. The original one has 2. 2014 model year, we already have the 4 magnets, but still, just replace them. It's much easier than cleaning them. It comes in the kit. And then drain plug and fill plug gaskets. Let me show you where these magnets go so you can see them, and we'll go from there. So first thing we're going to do is remove these old magnets, which are pretty loaded up with stuff. Just going to put them to the side. And then we're going to clean where they go really well. This cleaning is very important. This debris is what you do not want to enter the transmission. That is much better. Now, I'm going to take our 4 new magnets. One magnet goes here. One magnet goes here. You see the indentations, and that's how you're going to be able, these little indentations, that's how you're going to know if you, from the outside, if you have the new style oil pan or the old style. So basically the new style will have more indentations, one here and one right here. Now in this old style, this is a 12, it does not have these, so this is the location where you're going to put it, and I'll take a picture of it and put it on the screen. Now let's go replace the filter, and then we'll wrap up this job. So now we're going to remove the transmission filter, which is 2 bolts. Toyota loves to call it a strainer. It does have a filter element inside of it. There goes some of that old fluid. We're going to look inside this filter in a moment just for you guys to get reference. Got the new filter. Take a little bit of transmission fluid on the O-ring, which Toyota loves to do this in almost all their transmission filters. The O-ring does not come with the filter, which they don't really call a filter. They call it a strainer. It does have a paper filter inside of it, at least in this one. On some of them, actually, it does not. Torque spec for this is super, super low. 85 inch-pounds. I'll put it on the screen here. Make sure it is inch-pound, not foot-pounds, because you'll break those tiny little bolts right off. Always torque these, because whenever you work inside of a transmission, unless you know you've done this a million times, Always torque them to spec. That way you don't have any issues. So that's about it for this. We're gonna put the pan, add fluid, and get that done. But let's look at the old filter. So you guys always ask me, should I replace my transmission fluid? I had a Chevy, I had this, I had that. I always replace my transmission fluid. Well, in Toyota land, that's not the case. Usually these transmissions do not create a lot of debris. Even though this transmission had an actual problem that creates debris, the filter is still pretty clean. It's impossible to show you while we talk about it, but I'm looking at this filter, looks pretty clean. So that's your guide right there. I'll put a short video that we made so you can actually see what's inside of it, and there you go. Yes, we put a new filter, customer wanted, might as well, we're at this point. But if you're gonna pay somebody to do this, just the filter, it's not worth it. Replace your fluid every 60,000, 6 years. You will never have to get to the point where this filter is actually clogged. That's how it is with Toyota transmissions. So folks, at this point with this car, we're pretty much done. I mean, I'm gonna put the pan back, fill up with fluid. I'll leave a video right here if you wanna know how to adjust the fluid level or add fluid to this transmission, and that's about it. Remember, this problem was a factory problem caused by a software problem. So one more thing we're going to do with this car is make sure it has the latest software, and we're good. This affects the U760 transmission. Only in certain years though, not the newer ones. You only have 2012 to 2014 Camry, and then 2013 to 2015 Toyota RAV4. Most of these got taken care of under a policy that took care of all this. However, this one did not shudder under the policy. Policy is long expired, and now we're doing it like that. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.